Hey guys, welcome to today's module. In this video, I'll be covering negative space in UI design. We're going to go in depth into negative space and why it's important, and also I'll be showing various examples on how negative space was used in UI design. I'm also going to be giving some tips and tools that I use when working with negative space in my designs. So that's all we'll be covering, and I hope you're excited. So let's get into it. As we go on, let me mention that negative space and white space both mean the same thing. When you start going through articles online or learning materials or reading, you're going to see them used interchangeably. They both mean the same thing, and also they can be of any color or even an image. Negative space is a space between elements in design, and it's one of the very elements to get comfortable with if you're going to be creating good user interfaces for people. So negative space can be found in nature. Say for example, when you're at the beach and you are looking out into the sea or the ocean. So little elements, or little natural elements rather, that can disrupt your view are things like birds or trees. You can also see negative space on digital products like mobile applications or even websites. So there are two types of negative space. One of them is the macro space. The macro negative space is the space between larger elements. It helps highlight areas that you want to draw the user's attention to. For example, in the picture you're looking at, you have the larger image, and notice the space between the image and the company's logo, Medium, at the very top. Also notice the space between the image and the various article points, or the various article topics that are on the page. So making use of good negative space helps draw the user's attention. First of all, when you land on this page, you're going to see the image that is here, and probably click that first. Also, negative space can be microspace. Microspace is another type of negative space, and it's the space between smaller elements. And microspace essentially helps create clarity and visibility. So for example, the line height, as you can see in the picture. So the line height helps increase the space between sentences, and it decreases the strain on the user's eye when they are reading. So to illustrate negative space more better, I'm going to use a button, for example. So a button starts out as a text, and when we add space around this text, we create the micro space. So in coding, they call this padding. This space around the text here. And this is the micro space because this is a much smaller element. The element, which is the text, now has some form of space around it. And if we go on to add more space around the button, we have what is called macro space. Negative space can also come in form of line height. So notice how the text on the left is harder to read than the text on the right, and by introducing some form of space in between the lines, it becomes easier on the eye of whoever is reading. So why is negative space important? First of all, it creates room for designs to breathe. So when you're starting out designing your user interface, you usually will start with a blank canvas, and how you place other elements, text, boxes, buttons on this blank canvas eventually helps create what the user would see. And a good use of negative space would allow these elements to breathe in order not to overwhelm the user. It also helps users focus and creates less distraction, so that when a user lands on your product, they can focus on what you want them to focus and not be distracted by whatever else is going on in the background. It also increases visibility and hence interaction. So when you're using a product, you notice that you can see where the button is, you can see where the menu is, and once you know where these things are, you can go on using the product without much of a problem, and you'll always want to come back and continue using. You always want to come back and use the product again. It also echoes the proximity principle by Gestalt, which says that visual information is organized by people in a way that objects that are placed close to each other are seen to be similar. We'll dive more into Gestalt principle and design principles later on. So negative space also helps branding tone. Say for example, Apple or Google. If you go on their websites, you would see how they use space to tell their story and, bring their products to the forefront of the user's view. So generally, it helps them create a brand. When you see the Apple website or you see the Google website, it clicks in your mind that, okay, this is Apple, or yes, this is Google. So tips on how to use negative space. Something I like to do when I'm working with text is to increase the line height by 10 pixels. So if my text size is 40, for example, I add 10 pixels to 40 and that becomes 50 pixels for the line height. It increases readability. I also use a GRT calculator. It basically helps you put in whatever font. Okay, usually Google fonts, they don't support external fonts for now, so it helps you put in the Google font that you want to use and the font size, and it helps you calculate what line height best suits your design. Also, another thing I like to do when starting out a design is to use the Figma's inbuilt layout grid system. It generally helps create basic grid, basic negative space around whatever elements that you're going to be adding to your frame. So once I select a frame, say for example the iPhone 11 Pro frame, I go into the layout grid setting here and just add a simple grid to guide me on where to put my elements. Make the gutter 30. Okay, so essentially what this does is gives you a basic view on how and where you can place your elements. As you can see, if you're going to be going with the human interface guideline, which is from Apple system, or you're going to be using the material design guideline, which is from Google, they have various specifications on where to put what layout grid you can use and how your elements should look. So the layout grid system on Figma is a good place to start if you want to add negative space to your design. And finally, as with everything design, you always need to practice and practice and practice. Look at various good designs out there, see how they make use of negative space, try to replicate it, and with time you will get better. So see you in the next module, and I hope you had fun learning about negative space today.